I'm Don Everett, the chairman of the Sea Oaks Environmental Committee, who is sponsoring our speaker tonight. And I'm very, very honored to be able to introduce Bob Solari to you. Bob was born in Chicago and raised on Long Island in New York. I don't know if he's a Yankee fan or a Mets fan. He'll have to tell you about that. I won't tell him that I'm a Red Sox fan. He got a bachelor's degree from the University of Denver in philosophy with honors. He went to and graduated from the Fordham Law School, and he got an MBA from the University of North Carolina with an outstanding MBA award, the highest award that they can give for that program. He was for 4 years on the Vero Beach, the City of Vero Beach Planning and Zoning Board. He was in the citrus and real estate business for about 24 years. He was on the Vero Beach City Council for 2 years. He has been on the Indian River County Commission since 2008. He is currently the chairman of the commission. He is married to his wife Jackie, who is sitting right in front of me here, and for 28 years. He will discuss the renewal of the 1% sales tax, which comes up in the election this fall, but most importantly, all about Florida proposal. What it is, its anticipated impact on the community, and what citizens like you can do about it. At the end of his presentation, there'll be an opportunity for questions. So please hold them until then, and we'll get the questions at the end. So please give Bob a big Sea Oaks welcome.
Thank you very much. You did miss, I think, one thing in the bio. I'm pretty sure the one I sent you, it was referred to as my wonderful wife, Jackie. And if you were a spouse who had to put up with what she has to put up with me being an elected official, you'd understand why I never forget the adjective. The other thing, you'd think if you had somebody who knew somebody here that had inside information, he'd let you in on it. But no, Ted Mullet didn't tell me that a lot of you were wearing shorts. He let me come in dressed in the same suit I wore to the BCC meeting today. So you're going to forgive me, hopefully. I'm at least going to take off the jacket.
You can take your tie off also.
I'm not going to undress fully in front of you. I am a conservative after all. So there are going to be two parts to the discussion, one short and one long. The short part that you can consider as your vitamins or your castor oil, whichever you'd like. But it's about the optional sales tax. And to tell that story, I want to go to discuss the county finances over the last 8 years. And the packet that we handed out is all about the optional sales tax, with the first 2 pages being about financial information. This graph is the best single thing I've ever seen. Well, I composed it, so of course I think highly of it. Discussing the county finances over the last 8 years. Governmental accounting is very peculiar, and it's hard to get good metrics that are consistent from year to year. I found that the best, most consistent metric, which will actually be meaningful, is the ad valorem tax take. How much money each year all of you property owners actually pay to the government. In 2006-2007 fiscal year, we hit a high of $103 million a year in ad valorem tax take. But then, as almost all of us are going to remember, we had the Great Recession. And so with an ad valorem tax take, as property values decline, if you keep the millage rate flat, the tax take declines. So from 2000-2001 fiscal year to the 2006-2007 fiscal year, we had a growth boom here. The ad valorem, the property values all in all expanded rapidly, as well as the number of properties, so the ad valorem tax take went up till it hit that high of $103 million. Then we had the Great Recession. The Board of County Commissioners made one important financial decision, and that was we were going to keep the millage rate flat. So as the property values declined, the ad valorem tax take declined. So the ad valorem tax take went from the high of $103 million to a low of $69 million. And then, as the graph shows, it's slowly making its way back up. But The top line is if you just took the ad valorem tax take as of 2007, 2008, and allowed it to increase at the rate of inflation, which was somewhat low during that period. Well, and over the 8-year period, if you did that, the total 8-year ad valorem tax take would have been about $978 million. But instead, we held the millage rate flat, the ad valorem tax take declined, and over that period, it was more like $740 million. So, by having that one simple rule, keeping the millage rate flat, we left $248 million in the pockets of the taxpayers over that period. And I challenge almost any other government to do as well over the same time frame. Think of what would have happened if the federal government had actually had something like this. It wouldn't be focused so much on the national debt. The page with the blue bars is simply indicates debt that we paid off over that same period. So we didn't get through the period by just borrowing money. We paid off debt and consolidated some debt. The county has a lot of different reserve funds, so a lot of times we loaned money from one reserve fund to another area, paid off that debt because we get a lesser interest rate, and that helped both sides of that bargain. So the rest of the pages deal with what's called the optional sales tax. In this county, if you go and buy things, you're going to pay basically 7 cents sales tax every time you make a basic purchase. The 7th set is the optional sales tax. So you're paying that today. But the only way that can be implemented is through a referendum. And about 15 years ago, the citizens said, yes, we'll go ahead with the optional sales tax. That's ending in 2019. And for planning purposes, we're putting that on the agenda to see if the citizens want to renew it in November of 2016. It's the one time citizens of Indian River County get to have a direct vote on a tax issue. So, you citizens, I'm hoping that you'll start a dialogue among yourselves, discuss it, and see if it's something that you want to continue. When you go through the package, the first couple page on it just gives an indication of types of projects we've used the optional sales tax on. The second page is a page from staff which indicates what they see as some of the benefits from the optional sales tax. The next pages just put some of that information in a nice pie chart form. The top pie chart indicates what we've used the optional sales tax for, and this lower pie chart, what we intend at this time to use the optional sales tax for the next 5 years. The biggest thing that immediately jumps out is that we intend to use a lot more, a higher percentage of the optional sales tax if the citizens vote to continue it on road work. The next pages are simply, we do a lot of different planning in a lot of different parts of the county. One of the things we just finished up a couple months ago was called the Long Range Transportation Plan 2040 update, and the state mandates that we do a cost feasible analysis. That is, based on revenues we really expect to get, what is feasible. So, based on the revenues as they are now, the top map indicates road work which we add to the system without the sales tax. The bottom chart, you'll notice a lot more highlighted lines, thick lines. Those are additional roads we do with the sales tax. So that just gives you some idea of what might happen. Now, in truth, if you chose not to renew the optional sales tax, I doubt that the citizens of Indian River County would allow us to let basically the road system, the grid, collapse. So one result of that would probably be an increase of the ad valorem tax, though I doubt it would make up the full gap. Right now, the optional sales tax provides us with about $15 million a year. So it may be that over a couple of years, we increase ad valorem taxes by about $5 or $6 or $7 million in order to fill some of that gap. But we certainly wouldn't, especially not at one time, suddenly increase the millage rate enough to cover the full $15 million gap. So there'll be more information on the optional sales tax on the county website. I certainly do hope that, as I said, you pay attention to this, and I certainly do hope that you're all still awake after this. Ted, you're still up. Good. I feel good about that. So, just a little bit more about the county, then I'm going to get on to the All Board Florida. We went through the Great Recession basically 8 years. Very quickly, the first 5 years were basically focusing simply on needs, not wants. That's how we were able to keep the taxes down. We had a lot of deferred maintenance and deferred capital expenditures during that period. The second period, which I call the period of catching up, we went ahead as revenue started coming back and started taking care of some of that deferred maintenance and some of those deferred capital expenditures. We're now what I call more like the opportunity for the future. We are almost, not quite caught up with a lot of that deferred maintenance and deferred capital expenditures, but we're looking at different things we can do to improve the community in the future. Some of those things have already started. This summer, we're going to be opening the intergenerational facility in the South County. And in the North County this summer, the trap and ski area should be opened. Some of you may know that in Gifford, we just finished the revitalization of the Martin Luther King Jr. Park and had a ribbon cutting for that this past Saturday. So there are a lot of projects that are continuing in the county, and we hope that we can continue that as we go forward. Myself, one of the things I've been focusing on are conservation lands. The citizens told us that they wanted us to have bond issues to buy conservation lands. We had a $25 million bond, then a $50 million bond. We bought a lot of lands. We spent almost the last of the money, basically just as the Great Recession was hitting. So we hadn't done anything with those conservation lands. And it's about time that we did, that we started putting in some improvements so that the citizens could actually use them on a regular basis. And I believe this will be good, not just for the residents of Indian River County, but for our tourism business. So I think that our county staff, particularly Joe Baird, has done a phenomenal job. And that leaves us to the last thing I want to say directly on the county, and that's that we're going through a upper staff shift right now. Joe Baird, the county administrator, is leaving come June. The Board of County Commissioners has gone ahead and hired our finance director, Jason Brown, to be his replacement. So his position will have to be replaced. We have a public works director, Chris Moore, and his term ends in June, so he will have to be replaced. And we've cut off about 3 or 4 department heads during the Great Recession. We've just added one of those back, a human resources director, and we'll have to decide over the next year or two if we're going to add any of the others that we cut during the Great Recession and add them back to the payroll. But this is going to be a real shift in the leadership of the staff in the county, and I think it's a great opportunity for us to move forward in a very positive fashion. So that's that topic. The next topic is the one I think most of you are here for, and that's all aboard Florida. And here, I'd like to do 3 things. Basically, first describe the project and talk about why many of us do not believe that it can succeed. Second, talk a bit about the process of the project, which has resulted in a significant distrust of the Fortress Investment Group and the All Aboard Florida project by many Treasure Coast residents. And third, talk a bit about how Indian River County and the Treasure Coast are fighting the All Aboard Florida project and why the project is not a done deal. So, many of you will already know the answer to this, so when I ask the question, don't all of a sudden jump out and yell, but what is All Aboard Florida? All Aboard Florida proposes to run 32 high-speed passenger rail trains from Orlando to Miami and back to Orlando each day, beginning at about 6 a.m. and finishing at midnight. There will be stops in Orlando, West Palm Beach, Fort Lauderdale, and Miami. From Orlando to Cocoa, the train will run at speeds of up to 125 miles an hour. Through the Treasure Coast, at speeds of up to 110 miles an hour, and from West Palm Beach to Miami at speeds up to 79 miles an hour. When first presenting the project in the spring of 2013, an All Aboard Florida representative said that there could be only 3 stops because their studies showed that the trip needed to be completed within 3 hours. Importantly, he said at that time that All Aboard Florida would be a private project on private property by a private company. It was clear that this rail project was different from other rail projects in not needing or requesting any government assistance. A preliminary question, which I have to confess I did not ask at the spring of 2013, when the All Aboard Florida representative came and first described the project to me, is this. Could a high-speed passenger rail project using the FECI tracks going from Orlando to Miami possibly be financially successful without a significant government subsidy. High-speed rail is not new. The world's first high-speed rail line, the Shinkansen, was built in 1964 between Tokyo and Osaka, Japan. The Tokyo-Osaka line and the Paris-Lyon line in France are the only two high-speed rail lines in the world that are profitable. The Japanese Sanyo line comes close to breaking even, but no other high-speed line in the world generates enough passenger revenue to cover their operating costs, let alone their capital costs. They all require significant government subsidies in order to operate. I'll note that the state of Florida evaluated 4 alternatives from Orlando to Miami in 2003. 4 alternatives for a high-speed rail project. The 4 were using the CSX tracks to the west of us, using the I-95, third, the Turnpike, and the 4th, the FECR tracks that run through Indian River County. The first three routes were considered good. The FECR route was considered poor, yet that's the route that we're going forward on. Many companies have high-speed rail. China, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, and Spain have the 6 most extensive high-speed rail systems in the world. China, for instance, has 12,000 miles of high-speed rail. From the experience of high-speed rail in these countries, it's possible to determine 5 variables that at least minimize the necessary government subsidies. These 5 variables are population density near the rail station, degree of automobile ownership, connectivity to mass transit, dedicated high-speed rail line, and few or no at-grade crossings. Yeah, that's a good winner. We can look at the 5 variables and Fortress's proposed high-speed rail project. Take a look at these and we'll see how well they do. The first, population density near the rail station. The least dense major city in Europe is Berlin, and Berlin has twice the population density of New York City. Paris and Tokyo have a population density that is a multiple of all North Florida's proposed stops in Orlando, West Palm Beach, Fort Lauderdale, and Miami. South Florida's density does not bode well for success. Degree of automobile ownership. Now, you all live just hundreds of yards from this building, and how many of you drove here tonight? Yeah. So, and think, if you were going down to, say, John's Island, how many of you would walk? We are an auto-loving culture, and we're not about to give up our automobiles without a fight. So that, again, is another feature which doesn't bode well for the high-speed rail project. Connectivity to mass transit. How do people get from their home to the high-speed rail project? Paris, London, Tokyo, Shanghai, most cities connected to high-speed rail have feeder systems, subways, good bus systems, or other ways for people to get directly from their home to the high-speed rail station. This is not the case in Florida. So not only does Florida not have the density for high-speed rail, it does not have the mass transit systems necessary to deliver potential customers to the high-speed rail stations. Not doing so well right now, so all about Florida project. Now we come into 2, which I believe are actually more important. The first 3 deal somewhat with the financial aspects, but when we talk about health and safety, the next 2 are more important. Dedicated high-speed rail line. Japan Shinkansen has a dedicated service with separate high-speed rail tracks that exclusively serve high-speed rail. All aboard Florida not only shares its tracks, it shares them with slower moving freight traffic. This alone puts the success of the project in doubt. And think for a moment. Doing some background research, reading some articles, there was one about the Shinkansen line. This article noted that the Shinkansen line only ran during the day. It did maintenance during the night. So if this train is running during the day and the freight trains are running at night, I ask, when are they going to maintain the lines? That's never been discussed by the All Aboard Florida people. Finally, what is obviously the group's favorite, lack of at-grade crossings. Quite simply, safety suggests that you do not want cars and trains to be able to occupy the same space at the same time. Yes, the result is never good. A friend of mine not too long ago spent over 6 hours on high-speed rail in Japan. He does not remember one at-grade crossing. Not one opportunity for the high-speed rail train to collide into a car, a truck, or a school bus. Now, when I was growing up, we often said that if something was very unlikely to happen, the odds of it were 1 in a million. So if something was, 1 in a million, you didn't have to worry about the chances. But if you do the math, there are 342 at-grade crossings. The trains are crossing that crossing 32 times a day, 365 days a year. So who's done the math? Oh, come on now. That's just under 4 million opportunities for something bad to happen. 4 1 in a million chances with this high-speed rail train running on the same line as freight trains. So, I'm not wishing an accident anywhere, but anybody here read the Wall Street Journal? For last year, it seems like the Wall Street Journal has the monthly rail accident where they have a big picture. So, something's going to happen. And all I can do is hope that that bad rail accident, which basically takes out of town, does not occur in Indian River County. So based on these 5 factors, it would appear that Fortress's rail project has very little chance of success. Many people along the Treasure Coast realized this pretty quickly. They then started to ask if there might be other reasons for Fortress to be promoting this project. The project moved quickly along until the beginning of 2014, when more rumblings of the project could be heard. Citizens would be beginning to ask questions and show their concerns. And it was the citizens who then really woke up the elected officials to this and got us interested. And by March of 2014, it was clear that this private project on private property was asking for significant public support. One example of All Aboard Florida's request for public support was All Aboard Florida's application for a $1.6 billion federal loan through the Railroad Rehabilitation and Improvement Financing, called the RIF program. This loan would give All Aboard Florida an interest rate much lower than the going market rate, while putting the risk of the project on the backs of the taxpayers. Some months back, All Aboard Florida received now in the middle of 2014, All Aboard Florida received a $450 million loan to work on some of the portion between West Palm Beach and Miami. That loan had an interest rate of just over 12%. The RIF loan, if received, and this is going back a year and a half, would have had an interest rate of about 5.75%. The savings to All Aboard Florida over the 35-year term of the loan would have been over $3.1 billion. As spring turned to summer, more and more concerns were raised. These ranged from safety concerns with trains running at speeds of over 110 miles per hour, concerns about ambulance delays while waiting at grade level crossings. The town of St. Lucie Village, a long, narrow municipality just east of the FECI tracks in St. Lucie County, was told that they were going to have a railroad siding in their town, which would have given them a third rail. So the rail pulls over as the high-speed rail lines go back and forth. The problem is, the siding would have blocked every exit in their community, from east to west. So they were having some problems with this. And it seemed like the further south we went, the worse the problems were. Down in Stewart and Fort Lauderdale, the bridges that the trains were going over were really in a poorly maintained. I wouldn't be wanting to go on a high-speed rail train across these bridges, that's all I'm saying. And other people did. And interesting, one of the things that happened about a year and a half ago was Governor Scott wrote a letter to Michael Reininger, the president of All Aboard Florida, and said we need an open and transparent project. And almost it was the next day, Michael Reininger wrote back and said, oh yes, we want an open and transparent project. Absolutely, you're absolutely right, we're going to have one. A week later, All Aboard Florida filed a lawsuit to block somebody from getting financial information. More recently, it turns out that people in Stewart, Martin County, and probably the Care Group were trying to get All Aboard Florida's reports on the bridges. They were saying that this was proprietary information. And only in the past week has All Aboard Florida finally agreed to release these reports. So it's amazing what some people will call open and transparent. So keep in mind for a second that I digress. If I go along and say the BCC, the Board of County Commissioners of Indian River County, has been open and transparent, I'm not referring to all of Board of Florida's definition. So that is also one of the reasons why all of Board of Florida has basically, why trust has broken down for all of Board of Florida. I'll note that Mr. Reininger wrote in one thing that, to begin, safety is our unwavering first priority. Safety is our unwavering first priority. You know, when I debated Michael Reininger in August of 2014 and brought up safety 2 or 3 times, he never once responded. He simply ignored that. I brought up the idea of the roof loan being a subsidy, and he denied it. Absolutely denied that this was a subsidy. Anybody here have a home? Yes. Anybody have mortgages? You deduct the mortgages? You know, maybe when you're younger, you used to deduct the mortgages. Well, that's the subsidy that the government is providing you, the pecuniary benefit to a private citizen or company from the government. Well, that's all a subsidy is, and he continues to deny it. So this, over time, absolutely broke up the trust between, particularly me and I think the Board of County Commissioners, and actually caused us to fight harder. So the fight has now been going on for 2 years. And now some people have wondered about, have we made a difference? Has our efforts had any impact? I say yes, and I'll give a couple of things why. Anybody know what 90% plans are? 90% plans are plans that all of Board of Florida has to give every county along the way, which describe exactly what work they're going to do to make the crossings safe. Remember the 342 crossings that we really don't want to share with the high-speed rail train? What they're going to do to make them safe. Back some time ago, there's an article in the paper I came across that says all of Board of Florida's engineering plans are about 90% complete, the 90% plans, and could contain vital information, potential effects to traffic and public safety, that it hadn't completed in time for the draft federal environmental impact statement released in September. Well, actually, they should have been done in time for the draft environmental impact statement, but they weren't. But back, oh yes, I should tell you when this is dated, right? April 1st, 2005. So on April 1st, 2005, all of Board of Florida was saying, yes, we'll be getting those 90% plans to you shortly. On February 9th, I brought up an item on the agenda about all of Board of Florida, and saying you ought to expect some delays, which I'm going to go into it for a minute. But then Rusty Roberts from all of Board of Florida was at that meeting. Another commissioner asked him to come up and said, okay, Mr. Roberts, we've been hearing about these 90% plans for about 8-9 months. When might we expect them now? And Mr. Roberts said, oh, you're going to have them by the end of February. Anybody know today's date? Anybody have a question they want to ask me right now? Well, the answer is no. We do not have the 90% plans. So expect delays. We've now been reading about this All Aboard Florida project for a number of years. The first thing, and I didn't realize I had it until I was doing some other research, there's a press release from FECI and All Aboard Florida that came out in, I think it was April of 2012. It talked about this high-speed rail project. This was a $1 billion project that was going to be running in 2014. I then did a mini spreadsheet with other articles, and there's a Wall Street Journal article which says, well, this will be out in 2015 and cost $2 billion. There's a Fortune article which I think puts the cost at $3 billion. The last one I found said that this $3.5 billion capital project will be running the Miami to West Palm Beach portion in early 2017 and the rest by late 2017. So we had an impact? Yes. So any project that's delayed that much is certainly on shaky grounds. The third indication of why or how we know we've made an impact is the bonds. They decided when we were pressing on the environmental impact statement that they would change from the RIF loan, the federally guaranteed loan, to what's called a public activity bond. So if the US DOT authorizes it, and they can find a conduit, which in this case would have been the Florida Development Finance Corporation, they can issue tax-free bonds. In this case, the risk will no longer be on the taxpayer, it'll be on the bondholder, but they still have the subsidy, which is that reduced interest rate. Last summer, when they got approved for it, and I believe it was the end of July, there's a few days or a couple of weeks at most. This past December, they went for their second extension, asking for, and the U.S. Department of Transportation gave them an additional year to complete the project. But they have not yet sold any of these bonds. And the bond market has deteriorated in the last year and a half. So I'm hopeful that investors will be wise enough to realize that this bond is going to go south pretty quickly. One indication of that is that, remember those 12% bonds I mentioned earlier for that $405 million? Nobody remembers? Yes, we need to pay better attention. Well, a friend of mine just a couple of weeks ago said he looked it up and saw from Zacks that these bonds were now trading 80% on the dollar, and the interest coupon was now 20%. So even with the tax-free bond, I think that these bonds will be more in the 10 to 12% range. And so they'll be multi-junk bonds. So think again for a minute since this project started. The $1 billion project is $3.5 billion. 2, 3, 4 extra years have been added to the project, and that's very costly. The interest rate has gone up substantially from the 5.75% with loan to something maybe in the 10, 11, 12% range. So there's indications that their costs have gone up significantly, but no indication that their ridership would increase or that they'd be able to sell the ticket prices for more. In fact, with the price of gas half of what it was, the indications are that they'd have to have cheaper tickets than they originally planned. But somehow, we're supposed to believe that this project is still viable. So I believe that the project is in trouble. I believe we need to keep up our efforts, and if we do, we'll be successful. Well, I actually believe the odds are against us, but I'm an optimistic, so I believe we're going to be successful. The last 2 pages on the handout should be information about some private sector groups like CAT, CARE, Citizens Against Rail Expansion, CAT, Citizens Against the Train, Florida Not All Aboard, and also some contact information for your legislators. These groups all have websites, and it's a good place to get other information and follow what's happening. If you're against the project, the list of legislators is good. It's because we often need reminders of what we should be focused on. After this great graph, you remember this great graph? I love that graph. But my other favorite thing that the county hands out is right out of the county budget book, and it's this organizational chart. There are 50 different boxes on this organizational chart. Each box basically represents a line of business. So 2 things to keep in mind. There's all aboard Florida on this box. It's not even one of the 50 things we're supposed to know something about. The second question for you is, of those 50 items, how many do you think I'm really good at? Thank you for not giving an honest answer to that. But I wouldn't put up both hands while my fingers extended. But we regularly have to talk about all sorts of things. I just spent today 7 hours sitting in a chair at a Board of County Commissioner meeting, making decisions on all sorts of things. Next week, I'll sit down for another 4, 5, 6 hours and make decisions about a whole nother set of things. Each week, there's a whole nother set of things coming before me. Sometimes we forget things, or sometimes we need to be reminded about what issues the citizens really think are important. And that's why that contact information is important. It doesn't hurt to once in a while remind us that we need to be focusing on 1 or 2 or 3 particularly important issues. And personally, I believe that All Aboard Florida is one of those issues. So I'll conclude by just saying that the county, and this is not a county fight. This is a Treasure Coast fight. We're working particularly close with Martin County and with the CARE group. CARE's raised, I don't know how much they've raised now. I know that they want to raise over $1 million to keep their fight going. The county has already committed 1% of their annual budget, which is $2.7 million. And Martin County, on 2 different votes, has basically committed to about $2.8 million to fight All Aboard Florida. So we're engaged on it, we're fighting with a number of lawsuits, we're fighting by looking at the permitting process very, very closely. We will fight in any ditch, in any hole, in any piece of the jungle that we think is going to help us get a good result. But again, we need to know that this is the fight the citizens want us to keep working on. So I'll finish by saying the little picture I have, it's a cartoon, it's supposed to be Nathaniel Greene, the Revolutionary War general, and there's a quote from General Greene: "We fight, get beat, rise, and fight again." And that's kind of like how I feel with all aboard Florida and the Fortress Investment Group. The important thing to remember, though, is that in the end, Nathaniel Greene won. Thank you. I'll now be happy to take any questions. Just remember, the 50 boxes there, I may not have all the answers. I'll start with the gentleman in the green sweater.
Can you tell us who wants this railroad?
Okay, can I tell you who wants this railroad? Yes, I can. But a lot of people want it. You have to keep in mind, one of the things that's happened in this process, which is really discouraging, is that every bureaucracy that's involved in that has already decided before the public got involved that they want this project. The Obama administration wants high-speed rail. U.S. Department of Transportation understands that they want high-speed rail. FRA, the Florida Railroad Administration, they understand that their task is to get high-speed rail. That's basically why they exist. When it gets down to Florida, I think Governor Scott decided that, well, he turned down the one that was going to use taxpayer dollars, so he better okay the one that's using supposedly private sector dollars, so he wants it. But more importantly, now a lot of this, especially in the state of Florida, is political. Why haven't you heard from anybody outside the Treasure Coast? Keep in mind, politics is at the end of the day about numbers. The areas that want the train would be Miami, Fort Lauderdale, Palm Beach, Orlando. Orlando's terminal is going right into their airport, so it just fits into what they're doing. Those counties, the areas that want all of Florida, have over 8 million people. The Treasure Coast has 600,000 people. So, who wants it? The 8 million people in those areas who believe they're going to benefit. Who doesn't want it? The 600,000 people along the Treasure Coast who knows that that rail project will have a very deleterious impact on their community and their life. Sir?
I'm just curious about the economics from the people pushing the project. I mean, it's great to say, oh, we got a good rail, but what's driving them other than looking for bankruptcy?
I'm curious about the project too, and especially the finances. I had one of the first meetings I had was with the president of the FECI, and I like finance. I had a wonderfully written 4-page document about financial information. And I said, I had already passed this on to one fellow, but while you're here, here's my request for financial information. And he just pushed it back to me and said, that's okay, I don't need that. They from the start have said that their financial information is proprietary information.
Yeah, but what's pushing them? Why
Well,
are they
okay,
pushing it?
again, I can't say exactly what's pushing them, I can give some speculation. One thing is, they have about 8 to 10 other companies. Fortress Investment Group, the $70 now $billion hedge fund, has about 8, 10, 12 different companies. A logistics company, real estate companies, freight companies, container companies, that will all benefit from this project. Think about the freight business. The freight business is presently running on old railroad lines. It is somewhat profitable. It had some unprofitable years in the mid-10s, whatever it was a decade ago. And then the last 5 or 6 years has been somewhat, but not very profitable. But there's something called positive train control, which is an advanced signaling system, which the federal government has required on all freight lines. This signaling system will cost them $400 million. Well, if All Aboard Florida goes ahead, All Aboard Florida will have this $400 million expense, saving the freight business $400 million. And again, at the debate with Michael Reininger, the president of All Aboard Florida, that I referred to before, I just pointed out the fact that if you spend $1.9 billion on new infrastructure like you were talking about, the freight business will be more profitable. I thought that was as innocuous, straightforward thing you could say, and he just goes, oh, there's Solari with that freight conspiracy again. Well, they didn't even want to have a talk about these things. So,
I'm just curious, how many passengers do they estimate are going to ride on this? What is it? Is it 30 trips a day or 60?
32, 16.
30 round trips.
So how many passengers on these 32? All I remember is their gross number, which was 3 million passengers a year by, I think, the third year of operation. So they think that they keep on saying that, this is a great project. We're going to take 3 million cars off the road. Very few people believe that, but that's what they say. I mean, there's just the whole experience of high-speed rail success says this cannot possibly succeed. And just finish up with this and get the next question. They often will now bait areas with saying, well, we'll talk about a train stop later. Once we get going, we'll talk about a train stop in your community.
There goes this at the time.
Well, think about this for a minute, though. This is in Vero County. What do we treasure probably as much as anything in this community? Our low density. What does high-speed rail require? The highest possible density. So, I mean, for me, I'm a perfect believer that you can't have both A and not A. You need to pick. So if you want a low-density community, you cannot have high-speed rail train. And I would rather keep the low-density community. I'll go back to the question over in the back wall.
I'm from northern Westchester, and the legal budget of Metro North and the state of New York about grade crossings is astronomical. As people grew in the communities, cars got hit by trains. And in Europe, if you take the Channel, the train from England to the Channel is very slow. When you get to France, where it's a clear run, it goes 200 miles an hour. So how they can say they can go 110 miles an hour here, it just seems impossible.
Oh, it's the same thing as how they say they can make a profit. It just seems impossible. There are a lot of things that seem impossible. Sir in the black t-shirt.
They have to prepare an official statement for the bonds that they're proposing to issue, which should set forth all of the financial assumptions that they're making. Has that been prepared yet?
I believe one of those has been prepared, but I don't know that it says all of the financial assumptions that they'd have.
Have you seen it?
I have not seen it, but I've heard they have like pages and pages and pages of the warnings about the dangers of the project.
Or as an alternate to the location coming through Indian River County, what would be the projected cost if they went west of I-95?
I have not done any projections on the cost, nor would I have the ability to do so. FECI, or Oil Florida, certainly hasn't done that. They've steadfastly refused to, or consistently said they couldn't possibly consider using other than the FECI tracks. So I do not know what the cost is.
Please repeat the question.
No, I'm sorry. Sir.
You mentioned legal actions. Are there legal actions pending, and if so, where are they and what are the claims that are being made?
So are there legal actions pending? There are a number of them. One is up in federal court saying that the whole process that the FDOT did was wrong. I'll get one sense of it. The whole project was allowed by the U.S. Department of Transportation based on part of the code, which actually talks about highways and railroad crossings on highways. Because this part of the code mentioned the railroad crossings, all of our Florida said, well, that means that we can take advantage of this and go ahead with the loans. Well, we say that that's not the case, that this dealt only with highways, not with railroads, and you should never have allowed all of North Florida to consider this road.
Is some of the county's money going to prosecute that lawsuit?
Some of our county's money is going to do that, yes.
All right.
We also had a problem with the FDFC hearings, the Florida Development Finance Corporation hearings that were held first in Tallahassee and then in Orlando. Those were the most incredibly done deal hearings I'd ever heard of. They initially okayed the project by just the executive directors, not the 5 appointed members on the committee, saying, yes, you can do it. He actually said that, well, over time, I've been given virtual authority to allow this project. And then when the next step they tried this to do it, they went ahead and had a vote evidently and approved the project. But the new members hadn't been approved by the Senate. So that we said was wrong. But then when they went forward, they did things like all of Florida was going to have to pay a $1.8 million fee in order to get the loan. And that was in the Florida Development Finance Corporation's budget prior to them locating the project. So the whole process, we believe, was suspect, so we have a lawsuit going on about that. Though that one is not the best path forward, because while we believe the project was flawed and they need to redo it, they could actually go ahead and redo it. So there's those. Martin County also has a couple that they're working on. And interestingly, there'll be more lawsuits probably on some of the permitting process. Just found out that one of the permits they need is from South Florida Water Management District. And we just found out that a gentleman who worked for the district went, right after he left the district, went to work for All Aboard Florida, where he lobbied for All Aboard Florida. But that is evidently against the state statute, which says you have to wait 2 years before you can lobby against the agency you just worked for. But that's part of the problem that with All Aboard Florida all along. They've been very political and done everything that they can to manipulate the politics behind the process. Sir?
Yeah, so the lawyers are getting all the money. But my question is, you've done a great job of connecting the dots, and it sounds like it's going to fail. My concern as a taxpayer is the $2.7 million that we will be subsidizing all these lawsuits and whatnot, when I think there are so many other areas in the county that could use the $2.7 million. You read in the paper where our graduation rates in the schools are abysmal at best. My wife tutors at one of the schools. The teachers have to buy books and crayons. We have indigent health care. So as you see this thing probably failing for all the right business reasons, the free markets have spoken or are speaking, and that the bonds are not selling. I'm just concerned that spending that kind of money continuing down this road with the All Aboard Florida.
Okay, so are we spending too much money on this fight? Is $2.7 million too much? For me, I'd say no, and I'll give you a couple of reasons why. First, the example you use of the school system. The school system tax is totally separate from the Board of County Commissioners. They already half your taxes on your tax list are school taxes, but anything we did would have absolutely no impact on that whatsoever. So there's that. The other thing is, if the train comes, it will lower property values a lot more than the $2.7 billion. A better example is, does anybody here spend much time lately in Gifford?
Yes.
Oh, okay, Gifford is a very underprivileged community. The Board of County Commissioners, after the Great Recession, made a commitment to Gifford, and if you were in Gifford this past Saturday, you would have seen some of that taking place. The Martin Luther King Jr. Park, it was just totally redone in collaboration with Indian River County, the Health Department, Grand Harbor, Historical Society. That park was totally uplifted. The people in Gifford who were at the ceremony were extremely happy. Just to the south of that is 45th Street, and right now it's going through a beautification project, the end of which will be the repaving of that street. So the main street through Gifford is going to be totally uplifted. So the county on all those projects has spent over $3 million. What is the value of that project if All Aboard Florida, 4 blocks away, comes through that community? We have homes 100 feet away from the tracks. So I believe absolutely that this money is money well spent, especially if we can stop it. In fact, and this is something I said in the letter to the editor, my wife had ovarian cancer. I would have spent every penny I had fighting that fight. And if I lost, and she died, I couldn't live with myself. I could not have lived with myself if I had somehow held back on something and she had died. Well, by analogy, I think that this train could do to this community something like what the disease Jackie had. So for myself, I can go forward and spend the 1% of 1 year's budget fighting this project and fight hard, and if we even fail, I can live with myself. But I would be very difficult calling myself a public servant if I held back, didn't fight, and allowed the train to come through. But again, the final thing is, I've been a cost cutter since I got on the board. One of the first things I did was cut 13 unnecessary committees. And this is great. We have the most frugal county administrator in the state of Florida. And when I first went up to him and said, Joe, we need to cut these committees. They're not doing anything. They're just costing money. And he said to me, Bob, we can't do that. And I was flabbergasted. Why can't we do this? This is the right thing to do. Cut these committees, not do anything. He said, the last time we went to cut committees, we ended up adding one. But we went ahead and we cut them. And I did a spreadsheet then, and my estimation is those committees were costing us $1 million a year. We have now gone 5 years without those committees, saving $5 million. I'm very happy spending those to fight all, that $5 million to spend fighting all aboard Florida, and knowing those committees are still dead and hopefully won't be back for the next 20 years. Sir.
The economic reasons are all very strong that you laid out. But there is a problem also that it seemed like to me the attorney action should take a stronger look at. And that's how every road that's a grade crossing is stopped. And you don't have the ability to get from east to west to things like hospitals and fire trucks and ambulances, and you're putting people in danger that can lose their life because they're sitting there at a railroad track. And everybody in this community knows that trains don't run like they ought to. They get stopped and they stand there for 8 minutes, 10 minutes, 12 minutes, and on certain days 15 to 20 minutes. It seems like that the fact that the community's in danger, other than the economic means, is equally important to be concerned about.
So it is an equal concern, basically the safety concerns and other damage that this train might bring. Absolutely. And we've done what we can in that, especially with the draft environmental impact statement and our comments there. But one thing that needs to be realized is that the deck is stacked against us. We can do very little in terms of regulation or suggestions of how rail can operate. We've been preempted by federal law. And actually the preemptions that which bar us from doing anything actually go back to the period of the transcontinental railroads. Over the Christmas break, I read a book by some Pulitzer Prize winner on transcontinental railroads to see if they'd show any insight on the project. And the biggest insight was just how corrupt that project was. And they basically, there was a Hell on Wheels TV show. Maybe some of you saw that. And in that, the head railroad guy, Will Durant, was always going to Washington and handing out shares of Credit Noble A. And basically, that's how it worked. And they got a lot of laws in their favor, which really restrict what we can do. And then a Press Journal article about a year and a half ago, just as this project was getting started, noted that all about Florida and other fortress companies had already donated to campaigns, politicians' campaigns, or political action committees over $3.5 million. So the deck is stacked, but we'll continue the fight. Sir.
It sounds like that the death knell is going to be, they're not going to be able to raise the money. Is this all just smoke and mirrors for some other governmental institution allowing them to, for another year to collect bonds, and then in the end, when they don't collect the money, they're going to say, go ahead, do it anyway?
It may be. I mean, now you're asking for speculation, which I can't tie to any document or words, but from the start, what I thought would happen was to do the, and I actually told this to the president of all of Florida when I met with him, and he didn't like it. But I said, look, I mean, you can have this project. You've only got about $300 or $400 million of equity in this project. You can go ahead and do this project and go bankrupt, but meanwhile, you've added $300 million of value to this company, $400 million to this company, $300 million to this company, maybe $2 billion to all the associated fortress companies. And he poo-pooed that, but I wouldn't be surprised if that was the result. And then the rest of the story would be Amtrak would come in and take all the rolling stock from all over Florida and then run a very big losing slow train project through the east coast of Florida. And about 4 years ago there was an Amtrak project, and I was the only one on the east coast of Florida to stand up against it. But that was going to be promoted, was being promoted by FECI. And in their book, one of the books on that, they noted that the federal government would be picking up the operating losses.
Is there a coincidence of recent current events the last couple of years regarding the Panama Canal, the opening of Cuba, and Disney?
Three different questions.
Yes.
On the opening of the Panama Canal, One of the companies that Fortress has is a container company, and they have logistics companies. So a lot of people say that part of the reason for coming and wanting this is so that they can move more of that Panamex stuff into the Port of Miami and then up the east coast of Florida. They deny that, but I think that's a possibility. Disney, I actually talked to somebody from Disney early on, and they said no, they absolutely don't want anything to do with this. They say that they don't like the idea of gambling or anything like that, and you can make an argument that they don't want to send their customers down to Miami. So I'm neutral on that one. On Cuba, I got no opinion.
But isn't it true that the Port of Miami is expanding and they anticipate that the freight business heading north is going to improve greatly?
FECI, yes. Isn't it true that the Port of Miami is expanding and people think that the freight business is going to expand? A lot of people, some people, especially I think the Fortress people, say yes. The Port of Miami has expanded so they can take the Panamex ships. But on the other side of that, there are people who say that there are better ports closer to final markets. In Savannah, maybe Charlotte, a couple more ports up the coast. And it's quite clear that shipping by ship is cheaper than transporting it by train. So while that may be something that's in the Fortress strategy and plan, whether they can realize that would be dependent upon the competition that they face in other ports. Bobby?
Would you comment on what was in the paper this past week, I think?
You think I read the paper?
I'm going to tell you.
But I've said too many.
Anyway, they talked about issuing the bonds in 3 parts. They talked about that. Would you just comment on that for us? And
Okay,
that's-
2 things. One, our attorneys don't like me to say too much on bonds so that we can't have an interference with contract, thing like that. And the second thing is, I'm not a bond expert. With those caveats, I will say, what Barbara brought up is, evidently, when the US DOT extended the period for another year, they also said that they can issue them in tranches. They don't have to issue the whole 1.75 billion at one time. They could do, say, 600 million, almost 600 million, and do it that way. The idea being that the bond market, might find it easier to digest 600 million rather than 1.75 billion. Thinking about that, it may be able to get the first bonds, but people are then going to be watching the project and I would think have certain metrics going forward, and I doubt all of Board Florida could meet those metrics, but then each tranche of those bonds would by definition in finance increase the risk so that they'd have to pay more for the following bonds. So while that first $600 million may have a lower coupon than doing it all at once, they're going to hit it that level in either the second or the third, and they certainly take the risk of bad news happening. If you can issue $1.75 billion in bonds in one tranche, then that money's in your bank. But if you issue $600 million and get the $600 million and something bad happens, then it'll be difficult to impossible to get the rest of the money. Well, people are starting to leave, and it's getting close to 6, so we'll take 3 more questions. And I'm going to begin with the lovely lady with the dark hair.
A question regarding the at-grade crossings. In all of Board Florida's proposed plan, how is it delineated who's assuming the cost of the maintenance and repair of those crossings if in fact this were to become a reality?
Okay, so at these at-grade crossings, after the all Board Florida comes, who basically bears responsibility for the maintenance and other liability for them? Well, all Board Florida wants us to. Presently, the county pays for the maintenance of the crossings. Remember when those transcontinental railroads came and they had certain laws for railroads, they got a lot of breaks. And one of those is that they have the right of way, we have to pay for the easement. All we have across that is an easement, and we currently pay about $240,000 to maintain those right of ways. If all Board Florida comes through, we again haven't gotten the 90% plans yet, so the numbers will change. But our Public Works Director indicates it'll be twice that, about $500,000. But worse than that, right off the bat, all Board Florida tried to bribe us with the idea that, listen, we're going to give you these fancy quiet zones, and you're going to assume the liability. Well, we said no to that, and they came back a number of times to try to get us to do that, and so far we've continued to say no. But that is a big issue about who will bear that liability. Presently, we have it at crossings with the freight, but it's certainly a different thing when you have a 40 or 50 mile freight train as opposed to a 110 mile an hour high-speed rail train.